What is up, and welcome to another edition of the Bruin Bible. Will Decker, your host. Make sure you guys are liking and subscribing the podcast. We are brought to you guys today by our advertisers. Our advertisers are Bell to Bell Fitness, Shea Tor, a realtor out in Arizona, former Bruin alum, and my main man Howard Chang, a realtor right here in Los Angeles. Let's go through them, guys. Bell to Bell Fitness is a boxing gym on the West Coast used by their FIT acronym, Fight Inspired Training. My main man, Tony Gonzalez, was the boxing coach for UCLA for over 10 years. He has built this gym on the West Side to learn how to boxing, stay in shape, and get you all the essentials you need to become somebody that is obsessed with boxing and fitness. Make sure to check it out. Go into Bell to Bell Fitness and say you heard about it from the Bruin Bible, and you're going to get a free session with Tony Gonzalez. So make sure to check that out. Shea Tor, my main man. Shea Tor is a licensed real estate agent in Arizona and a lifelong Bruin. He's a current Wooden Athletic Fund donor and football season ticket holder. When not selling houses or going to UCLA games, he loves to travel the country, checking out different arenas, ballparks, and stadiums. If you're looking to make the move to Arizona or know someone who is, please reach out to our loyal friend, Mr. Shea Tor. His phone number is 602-487-3975. Once again, his number is 602-487-3975. Make sure to check that out. And then the local realtor we got out here, Howard Chang. Howard Chang is a local realtor with the Serene team at eXp Realty. Their team has an office right here in Culver City, though they help clients buy and sell homes all over the LA County and the surrounding areas. Howard and his team do a ton of business and are super in tune with the market, knowing winning strategies to give their clients a competitive advantage. Have amazing vendor referrals, are a one-stop shop for anything real estate, and just provide a ton of value for their clients. Howard and his partner, Kyle Draper, are UCLA alums and a huge fans of the UCLA football and basketball programs. You will often see them at games, tailgating and networking, and staying involved with the UCLA alumni community. They would love to help any fellow alumni with accomplishing their real estate goals. So if you guys have any real estate needs in the LA area, look no further. Howard is your guy. All right, guys, we're going to go into the episode. What's up, guys? Very, very, very tough loss for UCLA. No way around it. A heartbreaking 21-17 loss when, we were up 10-0 at half. We had a beautiful, maybe the best throw of the year, with Ethan Garbers hitting J. Mike in stride, a guy that we desperately need to get involved. I mean, you see the results when Servant gets out there and starts making plays. But just a total collapse. And the only way to put it, which always makes it more frustrating, Madman, is we didn't win. I think we lost this game. Minnesota didn't win this game. We lost this game, to put it lightly. You look at just the penalties, the raw penalty numbers, 10 penalties for 105 yards, whether it was Tapaki laying on the lineman in the red zone that gave them 5 yards to basically seal a touchdown as opposed to, maybe a field goal opportunity to send it to OT, multiple personal foul penalties to kind of, put Minnesota over the top in the second half. And, Darius Taylor just coming through there. The craziest stat, too, is I thought the defense played really well for about 3.5 quarters in this game. I mean, the play they made on the final drive to Daniel Jackson was a 27-yard completion. Guy Haberman said this in the booth. That was the only play Minnesota had
15 plus.
Or more than 15 yards. So it was just a heartbreaking affair. Talk to me on your initial thoughts, because I'm speechless watching this game as you are, and we've been texting throughout the ball game, and just frustrated because we talked about it. If UCLA was to get to a bowl game this year, I know it was unlikely even coming to this game, even from my perspective, but this win would have built up so much goodwill moving forward for UCLA, where now you're 1-5, you're 0-4 in conference, and it just it feels like the sky is falling for UCLA football, Madman.
Yeah, well, I mean, hard not to feel that way. And obviously, it's a very frustrating evening because I thought UCLA outplayed Minnesota for the whole game. And you said it, Will. And, you just look at the raw stats and sort of totality. 329 total yards for UCLA, 234 total yards for Minnesota. This UCLA defense held Minnesota to 234 total yards, held Minnesota to 41 rushing yards for the game. This same Minnesota team that just sort of out-physicaled and out-bullied USC last week in the second half was held to 41 rushing yards and UCLA just couldn't close the door. And it was just absolutely heartbreaking. This is the first game of the season, Will, where you feel like UCLA should have won and weren't able to do so. And I think there's a lot to unpack here, Will. And I'm gonna try and be positive here, because I think we just have to sort of think of this as we're starting from ground zero, right? I mean, we're sort of starting from scratch as a program at this point. And to your point, I don't know if it's realistic or rational or even healthy to sort of think about a bowl game at this stage of the game. I mean, to go 5-1 from here. I mean, it's so unlikely. I think what you just have to focus on is how do you get better every day? That's just where this mindset needs to be from now until the end of the season. But Will, I'll be honest with you, there was a lot that I liked. I mean, I thought that at the start of the game, I thought that Eric Bieniemy did a really nice job of. It looked like they had scripted the first 15 plays. Because there was a clarity of thought offensively those first 15 plays that we just didn't see the rest of the game. And quick balls, 2 read type of throws, got Sturdivant involved, got Loya involved. Even, nice ball to Matavao, nice ball to Connor Shaw, nice ball to Harden, really got kind of peppered it around, got everyone involved. That first drive, Will, Garber started 5 for 5, ended up in a touchdown. That second drive, moved the ball down the field. Unfortunately, on that tip, ended in an interception. And then things went kind of silent offensively for, about a quarter and a half. And then it was that kind of TJ Harden dump play for 28 yards that kind of set up the field goal at the end of the half. And then again, things went very silent for a quarter and a half until that second to last drive, Will. And I thought that was sort of some inspiring play from Ethan Garbers, stepping in, rolling out. He found Sturdivant on a couple balls, intermediate throws, found Loya, and then hit Sturdivant deep. And it looked like this defense was going to be able to close it out here, Will. And then unfortunately, on that last drive, I thought, ironically enough, the front seven for UCLA played so well. The fact that it was the last drive, Will, and the run game was just sort of taken out of the equation, just given time and score, I actually thought fell into Minnesota's hands, because the front seven was sort of just taken out of the game because they were going to be more throw heavy. And I thought the secondary really struggled tonight, Will, in limited action, with the penalties and whatnot. But, if we focus on the positive, just great to see J. Michael Sturdivant get involved in a significant way. He and Loya, Will, are just so clearly the two best receivers on this team. I mean, I know Garbers has a very deep connection with TMA, and I love TMA, and I think he's a fabulous player. But I think it's very obvious that Sturdivant and Loya are the two best players on this team from a wide receiver perspective, and they just need to kind of get the ball more. It was great to see TJ Harden, both kind of from a receiving as well as from a running perspective, try to, kind of make guys miss. And then on the defensive side, Will, I just think this Femi Oladijo at the edge, what you're sort of creating in that front four with Toia and now Oladijo, you've got two guys now, Will, that are commanding double teams. And what that's doing is it's allowing Schlesinger to be able to lean on any one side that he wants. And what a game he had, Will. I mean, 12 tackles, 2 sacks, 4.5 tackles for loss. I mean, I really think there's kind of been an identity that's been discovered with Schlesinger really being that north-south linebacker and Medrano being that east-west linebacker, and both of those guys playing off of Toia and Oladijo. So, when you see there was a lot of clarity in terms of defensive identity, I thought the first 15 plays were scripted really well, and then Garbers really competed there on that second-to-last drive in the fourth quarter. And then you hold this team, Will, to 234 yards. I mean, even the 2 touchdowns out of the half, that first drive, Will, was UCLA kind of getting stuffed, deep in their own territory. It's a short field. Penalties is what led to that first drive. And then again, the second drive was off of a pick. They start the drive at the UCLA 35-yard line, aided by more penalties. They really didn't have to move the ball until that very final drive and that 27-yard throw in particular. So it just feels like this was, defeat from the jaws of victory out here. But the key element here, Will, and why I thought UCLA sort of outplayed Minnesota for the vast majority of this game, but why we're on the losing end. And I have to say it, Will, it's hard to say. This might be the worst offensive line in the United States of America. I mean, this is just, it is unbelievable what we're seeing out here. 25 rush attempts, obviously includes some sacks there, for 36 yards. Garbers, again, running for his life every play. You just cannot run a credible offense with this offensive line. The challenge of staying in front of the sticks here, Will, is so significant with the deficiencies of this offensive line. There's just not much you can do. And I know we'll sort of get into it in a much deeper way about personnel and some changes, but my gosh, I mean, without a credible offensive line, the only way UCLA can sort of compete in games and win games moving forward, Will, is you have to make everything a low-scoring game, limit the number of possessions. The way UCLA is going to stay competitive in the final 6 games of the season, Will, is games that are 10-6, 13-10, 14-12. Like, you're going to be in those kinds of games because you just don't have an offensive line to create any sort of verticality whatsoever. And that was the key. It was really after that second possession, Will, up until the second to last possession. Let's call that 45, 48 minutes of game time. I mean, this offense couldn't do anything. And that's why a 10-0 lead sort of evaporated, because there's just no margin for error. There is just zero margin for error, from a defensive perspective, because this offense is just so limited given the trench play. So really unfortunate. A night where you give up only 234 total yards, you find yourself in L at home. Really, really crushing outcome here, Will.
And let me tell you something. I think the most frustrating part of this, as somebody that covers UCLA from the West Coast, somebody that, has been a part of the Pac-12 conference as a fan, as a writer, was what was the one common thing that I think people in the Big Ten Conference, even people in the SEC, came to UCLA and USC when they saw that they're headed to the Big Ten. They go, hey, West Coast football is soft football, undisciplined football. And right now they're right. I mean, for both teams in this town,
yes,
we've seen it back-to-back weeks, undisciplined, soft football. Like, when you need to make a play out there defensively, you're just not getting that third and one where Brosmer had to evade a sack and get down there. We have no pass rush outside of Carson Schwessinger, who has been fantastic. I love the kid. He's been outstanding. But if we bring Schwessinger, good luck getting a quarterback. I mean, Guy Haberman and Yogi Roth were talking about on that big third down conversion, the 27-yarder. They're like, hey, this is the package play where UCLA sends their best rushers. They don't get home. Brosmer finds the guy open. The lack of pass rush, the trench play, and toughness of this team is going to have to be light years better than where it's at if they want to even sniff some wins into the Big Ten. Because I'm telling you right now, we're at a disadvantage with the coaching experience on this team. You guys can take that however you want. We're at a disadvantage with the trench play on this team and the decision-making just across the board. And Madman, this sounds insane. Like, I would never run this play if I was going to be on an NFL team or something like that. But you want to hear my most controversial point of the night? When it was 4th and 1 at their own 12-yard line with a chance to put the game away, I go for that. I go for that. You have to kind of just – you have to will yourself to win in these situations. It's a gutsy call. Listen, I knew what was going to happen when we had to punt the ball back. I think everyone in the stadium kind of knew what was going to happen on that play. And lo and behold, it went exactly how you would think it was. They get a couple third down, big-time conversions. They go down the field. They get a walk-in touchdown from Darius Taylor, who, by the way, has beaten UCLA and USC in the last 2 weeks on some critical touchdown plays. I mean, do you think it would be crazy to go for it on that 4th down? I know.
No, Will. I mean, I was thinking the same thing, and I was like, and I think you're 1-4. You want to inspire your team. Here's where I thought it was the right call, because I totally understand where you're coming from. I think there's so much credibility in what you're saying, so much sort of logic and the right intention. I just thought the way the defense was playing up until that point, you were kind of pitching a shutout at that point. I think you wanted to sort of put the game in your defense's hands to win, because if you go for it there and you miss, particularly with this offensive line, that cannot sort of open up a hole, the chances of them being able to sort of get 1 yard when everyone knows it's going to be a run, I think are pretty slim with this offensive line, to be honest with you. And then you're just sort of handing a tie game, right? Like you're handing them a 29-yard field goal to tie the game, and then all this time to sort of win the game. So I hear what you're saying completely. I mean, I totally get it. But, up until that point, Will, right, the last drive, Minnesota got, 65 yards, out of the 234. So up
60,
until that point, you held Minnesota to like 165 yards of total offense, and you want to sort of put your best unit out there, and they hadn't really demonstrated an ability to go beyond the 50-yard line, right? Because the previous 2 touchdown drives were all short fields. So I hear what you're saying. I think we can sort of dissect the coaching on a number of fronts, but I actually think on that moment, Will, it was the right call.
Here's my stance on that, because yes, they did up to that point have 165 yards, right? The penalty yards is what we're not accounting for. The mental toughness, the discipline.
Totally.
I don't trust them in those situations.
Yep.
That's why I'm like, go for it on 4th and 1 there. I mean, we gave up 100. We gave up more than a football field of yards on penalties today. Like, that is insanity. So, like, for me, I know what this team is looking like at the moment, and I know we're going to make these dumb little, head-scratching penalties, to say the least. You have a chance to win the game. You got to get 1 yard. It's a game of inches. I know where we're at. If you're telling me you can't get a yard on a QB sneak, I know where this offensive line is at. But, man, you get that yard, you trim out the clock. UCLA's at 2 and 4. We're having an entire different conversation right now.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I knew it was over because of the discipline. We're penalty fouls, it just the pass interference.
No, we gifted Minnesota the game today here. Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, when you look at all three scoring drives were all aided significantly by double-digit yards and penalties. Yeah. And when you're talking about, look, that first drive, they only had to go 45 yards. The second drive, they only had to go 35 yards. And the last drive, they had to go about 65 yards. And so those are not long fields to begin with, right? You're not like saying this is a 90-yard drive, an 85-yard drive. These are short fields to begin with. And then when you add on 15 or 20 yards of penalties on top of that short field, you've just gifted this this team the game. And you really have to wonder. I mean, Deshaun Foster has discipline as his first pillar, right? When you talk about discipline, respect, enthusiasm, where is the discipline right now, Will? 10 penalties for 105 yards. You give up 234 as a team and then another 105 in penalties. So maybe it's a lowercase D. Maybe it's a lowercase D, Will. Maybe it's a silent D. Maybe we're saying it in a different language. But I don't know about the discipline.
Isn't it sad that I didn't have faith that Minnesota could move the ball like that, but I had faith that our team would somehow screw it up?
Yeah, it's tough.
That's where
I
was
really
at
tough.
with it. It wasn't even Minnesota's offense. There was no offensive prowess. Max Brosmer, God, this guy's in the hundreds of Division I quarterbacks, in my opinion, in terms of ranking. It's just
and they bottled up Taylor. Look, I mean, Will, I'll be honest with you. There's talent on this front seven. When you talk about Toia, Oladipo, Schlesinger, and Medrano, those 4 guys, and then you throw in K-How. I mean, there's a lot of talent in this front seven. I mean, this is the strength of this team. And so you have to be able to play games where the front seven really matters. And, you're going to have to slow the game down. I really think every time, Will, this team tried to go 5-step drop or have a longer generating play, it either ended up in a sack, it ended up in a hurried Ethan Garbers who got hit, or it ended up in a tip ball and ultimately ended up in an interception. You just have to kind of throw these 5-step and 7-step drop plays completely out. And I think that's what they did the first 15 plays in terms of the script. And you saw a team that really moved the ball nicely. Now, Minnesota really packed in the box after those first 2 drives and said, we're just going to completely take the run out of it. You're going to run every now and then. When you do, it's going to be 2nd and 10. It's going to be 2nd and 9. And then we're going to unleash our edges. And that was their big adjustment. And UCLA really struggled up until the end of that game. And I thought Garbers was really heroic in that second to last drive, Will, in terms of how he found Sturdy, how he found Loya, and then that deep ball was just a really pretty pass. Like, that's the thing. If that last drive goes another way, we're having a completely different conversation about almost the resurrection of Ethan Garbers, of, a week from considering being benched to the guy that leads the game-winning drive and gets UCLA off the mat. And yet now the narrative is going to be about just where this team goes from here, Will. So it's really difficult. I mean, we're starting to get into the territory now of, is this the worst team that UCLA has had in the last 30 years? I mean, we've had a couple.
We want to talk about it.
We've had a couple. We had that 1-3-9. Which was Chip Kelly's first season. We had a 4-8 with Chip. We had a couple 4-8s with Neuheisel. We had a 4-8 with Moya. Amora. I mean, and so A couple of 4-8s and a 3-9. The problem with that 3-9 season, though, Will, is Chip won the victory bell that year. So I mean, we're sort of we're starting to get
Isn't
into
that sad,
a place
man? Isn't
we
that
don't want to
sad?
be. We're starting to get to a place where we don't want to be, where we're starting to have those conversations. Is this have we bottomed out a little bit?
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So quick, yes or no. Are you for Ethan Garber starting the rest of the season at this point?
So, Will, I'm gonna the way you asked the question about the rest of the season, I think Ethan Garbers has earned the right to start the next game against Rutgers. I thought he played really well. Now, having said that, if things go south in that Rutgers game, remember there is a bye week after Rutgers. That is a perfect opportunity to be able to make a switch to Justin Martin and have him finish the season. So I think Garbers. Look, I know it's hard for people to sort of digest this. He had 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, all this stuff. He was running for his life every play. I thought the fact that he got to 300 yards passing was absolutely remarkable. I thought he read the defense pretty decently most of the night. There were a couple of off throws, a couple of bad reads, but he knew it was zone, go to Loya. He knew when it was man, go to Sturdy. Sturdy went 7 for 107 and a touchdown. We finally had him appear.
Beautiful pass on the Sturdy.
Beautiful passing there.
Yeah,
great connection. So I think he's earned the right to start again against Rutgers. Having said that, Will, this is 6 consecutive games now under 20 points. If we have another egg, if let's say we lose to Rutgers in kind of lifeless fashion and whatnot, I think then you have to make a change. Because the one thing that Martin gives you is he's a better athlete than Garbers. And when you have such a poor offensive line, to have a quarterback that's more mobile is just going to help you. So it's really painful that we're having this discussion, Will, just given Garbers waited his turn and waited for DTR, waited for Dante Moore, had to go through injury, all of these things. But to me, I think,
guy. It's
I think he did enough tonight to earn one more start against Rutgers, and I think you got to take it game by game. If Rutgers goes south, you got the bye week at that point to then do a whole fresh install with Justin Martin.
It's tough, man, because while I agree with a lot of those points, we went on this show, before the season saying if everything went right for this kid, he'd have a shot to challenge for the Big Ten yardage record, right?
Yep.
With how much they're throwing the football. While I think the line is pitiful and atrocious on a lot of different fronts for it, 11 turnovers is a lot of turnovers right now, man. And when Martin, he played in arguably the toughest environment they've had, and had no turnovers. And here's where I'd phrase it, where you got to start thinking about it, is next year Garbers is gone. You got to start preparing for a future where this team is, dealing with a lot less than what they have now. And you want to give Martin enough reps to be prepared for what's going to come next year, given the fact that Deshaun's coming back. So it's
a great point, Will. It's a great point about the turnovers and next year. I think, and I think that's why you're going to be looking at this Rutgers game very, very closely. I think even if Garbers plays well and you lose, sometimes you just need a different energy. And I think Deshaun's in a tough spot right now because Ethan has been through so much in the program. You want to try and find a way to do this as graciously as you can. I do think he played well tonight. I really do. And it just circumstantially was really tough. I think he's down to kind of his last start, and you got to make that assessment here with Rutgers. And then to your point, Will, you almost treat almost another refresh, after the bye and say, okay, you got 5 games. Let's see what Justin can do with that 5-game body of work and then carry over into the spring, because he's going to have to compete with Madden and Luke Duncan and, Hasselbeck, and it's going to be a really fun competition. And this can be a real opportunity for him to get a leg up and really start setting the stage for next year. I mean, Will, I don't want to beat the dead horse, but this is why I felt so just desperate for a victory tonight, because just the importance of getting to a bowl game. We've talked about it in year one, Deshaun. I mean, no Madrano, no Oladipo, no Toia on this defense next year, no KJ Wallace, no Keegan Jones, no J. Michael Sturdivant, no Logan Loya, no Spencer Holstage, no Josh Carlin, no Maliki Matavau. I mean, you're talking about a full-on reset here. I mean, if the irony is that there is talent on this team, the challenge has been, to your point, Will, on the coaching side, on the execution side, on the discipline side. This was not the quote unquote rebuilding year. Next year is the rebuilding year. And so in a year that wasn't the rebuilding year, to be at 1-5, that's where it gets dark quickly. This turns into a Tarantino film quickly.
Yeah, man. And, I think if you want to have some semblance of a competent offense next year, Bieniemy signed for next year as well, right? He's under a 2-year contract at UCLA. Offense has been complicated for Garbers to pick up too. I mean, that's no secret. I know what the line is, but the pass that got tipped in the red zone for Garbers. Yeah, was it totally his fault? No, but you cannot let that happen. Like, you're about to slam the door shut on this team. Like, if you go up 14-0 on this team in Minnesota and how they were moving the football, you probably win. The third one, it was a Hail Mary attempt. Like, we can just throw that one out. The second one was bad just because he was going down and he just threw. There was 2 defenders crowding around, where he was throwing. It was a bad pick, man. And you just can't let that happen. I'm sympathetic towards Garbers because I know he's not getting a lot of help. But it's like every other job, man. Like, when stuff's going wrong, people will always look at the quarterback within the game of football and be like, he's not doing enough. We saw this with Sam Darnold, right? When he was with the Jets, and now look what he's doing with the Vikings. Like, this is how it works, unfortunately. Like Baker Mayfield, when he was in Carolina, they're like Bryce Young, same thing, right? So there's a lot of this, and unfortunately it comes down to, can you make plays and can you not? And just unfortunately, there's not a lot surrounding him. The only 2 positives I got are, Sturdivant and Loya getting back involved in the offense, I think was so – I mean, it just made no sense why they weren't getting the football in the first place. Logan Loya, absolute gamer. And, I mean, we've talked about it, dude. I mean, we see these flashes with Sturdy. He might be one of the most talented receivers on just the level of skill that he has with Sturdivant. And, man, it's frustrating that he hasn't done well. And I just want to give a huge shout-out to Carson Schwessinger because this kid is a walk-on. He's outplaying this loaded linebacking room with Ali Kao, once a Nick Saban recruit at Alabama. Kane Madrano, we are pretty much in agreement that he's going to be an NFL player moving forward. The kid just had another dynamite night, 12 total tackles, 2 sacks, 4.5 tackles for a loss. Schwessinger can play, man. And every time there's a run near the line of scrimmage, he's the guy that's stepping up and making the plays. It's just really encouraging. But Madman, honestly, outside those 2, positives right there, there's just not a lot. I gotta cut and dry right now with what UCLA is going through. There's not a lot to be stoked about, especially on a loss like that. It's very, very tough to come away with a lot of positives. It's frustrating, but at least that team across town lost. Guys, we are going to be setting ourselves up for next week. Rutgers, maybe we can get back on the right track. I thought this was kind of a must-win game for us, but, stay tuned, guys. We're going to be doing, college basketball moving forward, which we are very, very thrilled about. Any parting thoughts as we end this live, Madman?
Yeah, Thriller. I mean, it's just tough. I think what you can gain from this, and I completely agree with you. This is, we're in a tough spot here at 1-5. I mean, this is not easy. There's a 5-game losing streak. I mean, the number of times UCLA has had a 5-game losing streak over the last 40 years, you can count on one hand. I mean, it's you don't need many fingers to. So, we're sort of in an unprecedented bad stretch here. There's no question about it. But I do think there's an identity that needs to be formed now, that this is a defensive team. This is going to be, you got to go win games 9-6. You got to go win games 12-10. You got to go win games, 13-7. Like, that's what it's going to have to be. And I think you have to sort of build your entire strategy with that front 7 and the 4 guys that we talked about. Because again, Will, I don't want that to kind of get lost as well. I mean, all these other points are significant. Darius Taylor was bottled up. That team only had 41 rushing yards. This is a stout front 7, and you have to be able to just generate a situation where they are in the game most of the time. And I think offensively, I think what I don't appreciate about the run game, to your point about helping this offensive line, is, have you noticed it's always these slow developing run plays out of shotgun where it's like Garbers is almost faking a throw and then rushing it. And it just feels like there's 2 or 3 defenders in the backfield before the running back even has a chance. I really think you got to kind of go back to I formation, under center, and just straight handoffs, Berger, Jones, Harden, and just keep guys fresh. And I think you got to run the ball more. And it's just got to be straight line rushes. And, you got to shorten the game and allow that defense to kind of stay in the game. So, and then off a play action, take your shots with start event. And then off a play action, find Loya for first downs. I really think you almost have to sort of go back to a super simplification. You almost need kind of like a high school offense here, Will. You just got to run the ball.
You need a therapist for what this
and
offense
then just go off a play action to your levels. Level 1's Monteval and Harden, level 2 is Loya, level 3 start event, and it's just really that simple. And you just you run I mean, you bring Atkins in at fullback, or you just have the one tailback back there, bring in multiple tight ends. I thought UCLA did a good job today of bringing an extra offensive lineman. I think do more of that. But I think you got to just sort of throw all of this other stuff out the window and just, be a run-heavy offense that plays really good defense. I mean, a true kind of Big Ten team, start channeling your inner Iowa over the last 10 years. I mean, I think that's the way it's going to have to be moving forward.
Mental toughness will separate this team from being where they're at now to ever assembling something within the Big Ten Conference of football. It's mental toughness and coaching right now. I'll be very, very poignant on that. Thank you guys for tuning in. We will be back in live later this week. Bruins basketball season is close. We're going to have probably our first basketball episode this week, leading into the season, talking about our thoughts, what Mick Cronin was able to do in the recruiting portal, and, everything going on there. You guys have a great rest of your night, and let's hopefully get back on track this week against Rutgers. Take it easy, y'all.